WWT presents Meet the Chief.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Meet the Chief. My name is Tracy Sever. I'm the head of our global cyber strategy and go-to-market here at WWT, and I am thrilled to be joined by Barry Mainz, who's the CEO of Forescout. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with these guys in the market. They're a major player in the IoT, OT, and visibility space. And Barry has been in this industry for more than 25 years, recently in the seat of CEO at Forescout and an operating partner at Crosspoint Capital. So welcome, Barry.
Yes, thanks for having me, Tracy.
Wonderful. So we talk a lot with our customers and just generally in the industry about the need for comprehensive visibility. And that's not just for traditional IT environments, but also for IoT and OT, which is operational technology environments as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of that visibility? And then, why it's so critical for technology like Forescout to reduce complexity that our security teams are dealing with.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, as we know, we have lots and lots and lots of things on our networks. And for companies to protect themselves for the right security strategy, you have to know what's out there, like what's trying to log on the network. And once you know what's out there, it's good to classify it, tell them a little bit about that particular device. And in particular, in the IoT OT, where they may not have the right signature, may not have the traditional software loaded on. And then, customers are really looking at, hey, what? Tell us a little about the risk associated with what's on there. And that's really starting to really build a lot of value in and around making sure that when things try to connect to a network, there's some sense of compliance, and then there's action afterwards. That's all controllable by our customers. And we make it, that single platform to be able to do that versus 5 or 6 other applications that they ultimately would have to try and put together and stream together to do a similar thing.
Yeah, that's so important right now for our customers because we all know that complexity is the enemy of security, especially when you get into some of these older legacy environments that are typically seen in these IoT and OT landscapes. So I think that's such a huge value prop for our customers.
It's not uncommon when we go do a proof of concept or a proof of value, and we go into a company, could be a hospital, or it goes into a large bank, and we do a proof of concept and we install our software. They're always shocked by some of the devices that show up that they never even knew they had. Someone brought, in a hospital recently, we had, the Children's Hospital, we had 42 Xbox/PS4s. People bring them in. It's in the cancer ward. Who says no? You install them. Hey, those are full functioning computers, not protected, not secured, and onset onto the network. So you're right. I think it's really, really kind of changing as we have the ability to connect all these things to the network.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, and that is an interesting use case. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other areas where you guys are seeing just a critical need for Forescout and this type of technology?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 areas. One area is just the traditional, hey, can you show me what's on the network and can we put some control to block it? That's one. The other piece is risk and exposure management. With some of the new laws that are, been enacted by the government, like the 4-day compliance law that happened back in January, and some of the new things are happening in the EU, companies are required, if they do have a breach, to disclose it. Well, they need tools to help them understand what is it that happened. And we can provide them a lot of details on that. And then the third leg of the stool, which is really, really, kind of an important thing, is that with OT and IoT devices, you can't use a traditional platform and traditional software tools to understand about them. You have to take a network approach because there's signatures coming off the actual device. And we have technology that looks at those signatures and say, hey, that's a, Schneider Electric PLC 4.2.2. And there's no way in heck that you're going to be able to install an agent to get that. So we provide that level of visibility, risk, and asset classification like we do for traditional IT devices. So it's a really big, powerful kind of a plus to be able to do that.
That is, and I bet you guys are installed in just some really unique environments as well. I mean, I think what some of the use cases around mining and some of those remote areas where they need to have some sort of, security around those. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of those types of use cases or kind of some of the more interesting things that you've heard your customers leveraging technology for?
Yeah, so I was recently meeting with at RSA, met with a CISO from I think they're the second largest grocery store chain. I think they'll be the first after the merger comes through.
Mhm.
And they were talking about saying, "Hey, we're okay." But the CEO came to me and said, "Hey, we need to know about all of the other things that are out there." So we did a proof of value. We started being able to take a look. Slot machines, to automatic. They do a lot of meat processing for the grocery stores for their kind of their own brands of cold meats. And they said, "Oh, we have all these automated knives, and they're all connected to the network, and they could do some things, and we need help there." And also, by the way, we just changed the doors in the last 9 months. So none of them have keys. It's all electronic. So theoretically, someone could log in and open the doors or lock the doors. We can't have any of that stuff. So it was all around things and OT and meat. And I was really shocked that they said one of their big businesses was renting DVDs, and that they have these DVD machines. Most are all cash, and they're in the southern part of the U.S. They have 185 grocery stores that have DVD rentals, and they said, "Hey, this is we have to make sure we manage those things, and today we probably could do a better job of that."
Oh, that is so, I love to hear the use cases and how it applies to these real world scenarios, because it is such a unique technology that you guys bring to bear. And a lot of times you're talking about physical assets. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. To take it down a level, and we kind of think about more philosophically how we look at cyber today, like we focus a lot on things like zero trust, which inherently we need to be aware of the entire attack surface. Can you guys talk a little bit about how you fit into zero trust strategies and how you guys are driving that for your customers?
Yeah, so we fit into the zero trust networking side. And so this started with an initiative that we had with the federal government that we're still part of for the last 7 years. And they used to call it comply to connect, which is
Mm-hmm.
really zero trust, right? Hey, we've got to have a set of trust, sort of variables. And if you adhere to those, then we let you on the network. If you don't, maybe we have an ability like we do with Starbucks in their and the retail locations or their coffee shops. People are logging into the network. We know that they're not a trusted asset, so we can actually look at the device and say, "Hey, it's logging in through here. Let's make sure we put them down a segment or a portion of the network that makes sure that they don't have access to all the other accoutrements that they could go do bad things with." So we work with a lot of them around, again, that zero trust, saying, "Hey, we don't trust anything." And so we want to make sure that everything that comes on has to go through a set of protocols, whether it's coming through a Wi-Fi connection and or coming through an on-prem connection.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's a different lens of looking at it too. And I think that what that tells our viewers, and as we look at us, the practitioners that are having to, navigate, how do I mature my zero trust architecture? There's so many components of it. This is obviously a very critical one. So thinking about kind of, your seat today, right? You've been there for about a year. Or is there anything that you're seeing that's happened over the last year, AI, that is affecting how you guys go to market and some of the market dynamics and challenges that the CISOs are facing that you guys are able to help out with?
Yeah, so I've been about a year and a half now. So not that I'm counting, but a year and a half. And yeah, so it's really interesting. I was part of a discussion, and super interesting. There was banks, federal government, sort of branches, civilian, both civilian and Fed, and they're all worried about. So these language models are put together by people, and there's their own biases, whether that there's technical biases or not. And they said we're really worried about the outcome, and if we're allowing AI or a generated model or language model to solve a problem, how do we know they're going to solve it the correct way? It's only as good as the language model's built. And so there was a lot of worry on, and what's the liability if the language model messes up? So, let's say you put language model on, one of the banks was saying we're trying to use it to do, hey, when fraud comes, how do they, take those calls and determine if it's fraud or not? How do they route all those calls? Well, what if they don't route them correctly? Today they have people to do it. It's pretty heavy and it's intensive, and it takes time, as we know if you ever call them. How could they do it with an AI implementation? And they're all worried about, hey, what's the liability if we give the wrong information on as a result? And quite frankly, we're implementing AI, and we're working on, trying to solve that challenge as well, and making sure that we use a lot of our own data, and we, have the right governance around that. So you're providing the right, directive with the particular recommendations. But yeah, it's all around the liability for, giving poor results to the user.
Yeah, that it is. It's so interesting because obviously we're seeing it affect our customers in a multitude of ways, and we're thinking of AI from two spectrums. From the WWT side, where it's how do we leverage AI to improve security, right? So kind of like you said, like how do you pull in the right data into these models, so you're actually driving better outcomes, but also how do you protect against AI, as a kind of a security aggressor coming into the environment. So
Yeah.
it's very multifaceted, and it's certainly an interesting one to continue digging into.
Yep, that's exactly right. I mean, we're using AI right now. We're in alpha and moving to beta shortly here, where, as we all know, there's so many alerts and there's so many things coming into the platform, and being able to tell based on our AI and some of the machine learning that we have to tell the user where should they focus on. Hey, we've got all these alerts, there's information coming in, where should they focus? And we think that's a very, very practical way that's actually, we feel with a very, very, very high level of confidence, we can provide the right care and feeding and direction, and also save them a lot of time and effort in trying to find things and make sure they're doing, again, what's the right priority that they need to focus on.
Barry, another really interesting aspect of your career and role is your involvement with Crosspoint Capital. I know that team really well and have so much respect for all of the organizations that they're really building and driving to market. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Crosspoint, they're a private equity firm, and they focus on cybersecurity amongst many other technology areas. And then through the lens of what you do at Crosspoint, where do you see the market moving as far as emerging technologies and trends that both our customers and folks that are also in the investment community can kind of look towards and kind of see develop?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a few. You mentioned it, AI. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, because absolutely, positively, there's a lot of real big benefits that we can leverage in leveraging AI to do all kinds of things. And so that's one that, again, there's a microscope looking at where's the value prop, what companies should invest in, and how do we leverage that. So that's one. The other piece is OT, IoT. It's not a, I'll tell you a little bit of my career. I spent 10 years at Wind River Systems. So we did embedded systems, which turned into smart embedded, which in turned to IoT, OT. We didn't call it OT back then. We say IoT, and it was smart things. And we were about $580 million when I left. We had about 1,800 employees. And I think at that point in time, over the 20 years that the company had been in business, we had something like fielded devices, something like 900 million fielded devices. So it was a lot of devices out there. And the reason why I bring that up is we show up now, we have a lab, Videri Labs, and Crosspoint contributes. They have their own lab, but we put a lot of data together. And we were noticing about 7 months ago, not only in the Crosspoint Labs information they have in their lab, as well as the Videri Labs, which is Forescout Labs, we started seeing IoT devices, the operating system, as being ones that had vulnerabilities. We hadn't had that before. And it was, unfortunately, VxWorks mostly, previous companies. So, of course, I got a lot of grief. Hey, were you there then? I'm like, yeah, I was. Because you can see it. And these devices are there 20 years, 16 years. None of them ever thought that they'd have that shelf. Like, they didn't think about IPv6 or, patch and vulnerability. I mean, you look at some of these systems, a base station in the middle of Alaska. Who the heck's climbing up there? Going to put a USB stick there and upgrade the thing? No, that's not how they're done. So the point is, we talk about IoT, OT, and the vulnerabilities there, and the news tax service. AI is the other piece. And I would think the other thing that, we're starting to see out there is, kind of the next generation SIM. What's that look like? You got a SOC, SIM, what they look like. I'm not sure customers are super jazzed about the data model and what they pay. How does it, what's the next gen going to be? You see consolidation already happening in the industry around there. What's that going to go look like?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting one. It kind of ties into a lot of the movement that we're seeing in the industry around XDR and how it fits into that motion. And I think like the resounding theme amongst all of it is connectivity and creating like a uniform umbrella where all of this data filters into it, so you have a better experience for the practitioners, right? So they're able to
That's
respond
right.
more quickly to the threats and take action. So
Yeah.
another interesting thing with Crosspoint too is I know we talked in passing a lot about RSA, but can you talk to us a little bit about Crosspoint's connection with RSA?
Yes, good question. Well, I think many of you don't know that Crosspoint owns RSA 100% now. So they own the conference, and they can help drive and also put and encourage different kinds of themes in and around the conference. And as many of you know, it was great to be at the conference. Just you could kind of feel the post-pandemic sort of melee go by. It was really crowded, and I love the fact that it seemed like we had a better presence. Certainly, the federal government was there, really, really, this time, especially because they want to make sure that they're collaborating with, kind of the, both sides of the fence, not just federal, but also on the commercial side. And the other thing I wanted to make a point is that Crosspoint, and I think is very clever. The reason why they acquired RSA was not just because they wanted to have the conference, but they also wanted to make sure they had access to the data. So, and some of the data is, if you kind of know how, and I didn't know this when I joined, but I thought this was fascinating, is that when how they find their sort of presenters for the next year, people submit all of their, kind of their ideas. And so they do that. November is the deadline. So right now they're submitting papers for next year. So they get to see the papers. They also have a bunch of things in and around new technologies and awards. So people are submitting new technologies and awards. So they have all this data. And, interestingly enough, they get to be able to peek around the corner. It allows them to also get a window into maybe where they should invest. AI came up 3 years ago. MSPs came up 7 years ago. So remember, they're kind of coming up. They have XDR was 8 years ago. So, you start to look at some of this stuff. EDR was, I took the dates down. I just remember because there was a talk. EDR was 9 years ago. So these things were, kind of coming out as being an interesting. And then, of course, they took off, if you think of those categories. So, there's some interesting things that, happened this year. I don't know if I'm 100% at liberty to tell about what they are. I mean, AI would be an obvious one, but that's not necessarily newish. I mentioned it before. OT and IoT is a big issue as a vulnerability point. So I think we'll see a lot of investment and areas in how to protect and make sure that we're safe pursuant to our implementations, IoT and OT.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I mean, you think about some of the talks that, like, for instance, like Jen Easterly gives, it's all about critical infrastructure. And really at the heart of that is IoT and OT. And that's like the lifeblood of our nation. So really, really interesting stuff. And I would certainly pay a pretty penny to see some of those early access reports, Barry. So that's awesome, and it is amazing to see how innovative Crosspoint is, and how you guys are really at the forefront and driving so many of the conversations that our CIOs and CISOs are having. So kind of to dig a layer deeper, we'd love to get to know you a little bit better. I know only because I was asking about the various books that are in your office that, you're a bit of a music buff, but can you talk to us a little bit about that?
The books, music, which ones do you want me to start with?
We can do books about music and then go from there.
Well, I have a book. I'm actually staring at part of it here. It's the 50-year Stratocaster Chronicle. So it just shows over the 50 years the guitars that were made. Pretty amazing stuff, and how some of the vintage guitars, why people want them, and what they're worth. If you're a guitar buff, they're it's interesting. It's like vintage cars. It's like also vintage guitars. So anyway, but yeah, that's kind of one of my hobbies.
That's cool. So do you have like a Wayne's World, song? You go into a guitar shop, what do you play?
Well, it's not Stairway to Heaven, so I'll just tell you that, because if you do that at anyone, you're going to get someone will pull if it's plugged in, pull the jack out. If not, let's see, which song do I play? Probably be an Eagles tune, like, Hotel California is pretty good to play. Especially since you're not. I mean, I'm not going to go jam on a one, but it's a nice one to play. You can just hear the sound of the guitar, and I think it goes through the chord progressions pretty nicely, so you get to hear the sound, true sound of the guitar, pretty nice.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you ever play live?
Live in my mind, but no. I mean, a little bit at my house and with friends, but no, I don't play live.
No.
That
All
would
right. So just
require a lot more work on it.
all right. So just some ideas for next year's SKO for you there.
Yeah, come out playing a guitar. And
Yeah.
Tracy, nobody knows this at my, I guess they do now, but no one knows this works. So I thanks a lot for making that a suggestion. I appreciate it.
Oh, 100%. Mission accomplished. No, so that's so wonderful. And Barry, this was such a great chat. Is there anything, that you'd like to leave with our audience today? So for our folks that are out in the field that are supporting our customers, and for our customers that are kind of peeking around the corner, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. I would say that companies are going through a big transformation now in the way that they're organized to support IT infrastructure. And that would also mean OT infrastructure, things that are there. Encourage you to ask questions about some of the challenges. I would encourage, if I was a rep, I would be asking the senior levels in the organization, hey, how are you thinking about protecting the overall network? Because many of your large clients have OT and IoT networks, and it's really hard for them. And so tell me a little about that. What are you thinking about in terms of how you're solving those problems? A little bit about maybe the challenges they're going through, especially if they've got any reporting requirements. If they're large enough or they're publicly traded, they're going to have the reporting regulations. And then, be able to game board them with, hey, there's some solutions out there that can really help them. I mean, we're one of them, but you have a host of other solutions. But that problem about how do you secure both the types of networks, what's the right structure, and be able to be thought partners with them, your customers rather, and be able to tell them maybe some suggestions. I think that would be I know I would like to be talked to that way. I know how some of the challenges are that we have, but I think that could be a great way to start some of the next generation conversations with the customers.
Yeah, that's so helpful, Barry. And I know that, for our customers who we really treat like partners at the same table, like those are the kind of conversations we have, because it helps them kind of dig into their overall strategies, how they can approach it, and then adding value with thought leaders like yourself and the folks that support your team. So that's highly valuable for us. And Barry, we just sincerely appreciate your time joining us here on Meet the Chief, sharing a little bit about yourself and about Crosspoint and Forescout. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And hey, enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much, Barry.